Welcome back to the Piping Pastor. Today, we'll be entering into our second discussion on the topic of pneumatology. And today I am smoking a Vulcan mixture out of my Peterson bin Dublin. I noticed today when I was choosing my tobacco that my rotation has gotten rather Virginia heavy. Pardon me as I check my microphone. Unintentionally so. I try to keep a balance usually of what's in my rotation, but since I have gone through all of my plum pudding reserve, and I haven't switched it out yet with the bourbon barrel aged reserve, and I cellared the Burley Flake number 4. Decided to cellar that in any case. I was left with just a wide array of Virginias, and then my Balkan mixture and Fusiliers ration. And so it's like, okay, well, looks like I'm going the Balkan mixture today. Not that there's anything wrong with Virginias. I love Virginias, and we are getting closer to summer, so it does a bit more sense. But I will continue smoking my deep Englishes even in the middle of summer in the afternoon. I'll just switch to iced coffee, and I'll still smoke my Northwoods. So, and I am hoping to be able to get some more videos out this week. So might be able to release some more in the coming days because I'm decided to take a week off. I've been traveling overmuch in the last few weeks. North Carolina twice, South Carolina, Georgia, all over the place. And in 2 weeks, I'm heading out to California again. So I'm just taking the week to stay at home and maybe spend a little time out here reflecting with a pipe. So maybe some more videos coming down the pike more often than usual. Or may not. I may just spend the time out here enjoying a smoke and relaxing and recharging before I have to get back out and be the road warrior again. But before we get into our chat on pneumatology, I did want to share this with you. This is a recent discovery of mine. Some of you may already be aware of this person, but this is Pablo Neruda, and this is a collection of his work. He's a Latin American poet, and I found this in a bookstore. Wasn't even looking for it. I was actually in the bookstore with one of my daughters and having a wee look around because she's looking for some of the books that she reads, and I prefer the used bookstores. This is independently owned, so I still believe in supporting independently owned bookstores, but I typically don't spend a lot of time and money in even the independent bookstores that sell all new books because they're invariably a lot more expensive. And I'm a bit frugal. So I prefer going to the used bookstores where I can pick up a book for a dollar or two. Or sometimes, 10, maybe 15 if I'm feeling froggy. But so I was in there basically with her so she could look through and try to find some of the new release books that she's interested in reading. And I just walked by a shelf and I saw this and I just picked it up, sort of leafing through it. And the poetry in there is amazing. It had a nearly visceral effect right away. I mean, it's just real deep, raw, emotional stuff. And you can tell the difference between, a good poet who doesn't necessarily invest their selves in their writing. They just have good mechanics and they've been taught well and they're good with rhyme and meter and so forth. And then there's also the poets who have just desire to pour their heart out on the page and don't have any formal training. And I think Robert Frost referred to that as playing tennis without a net. Um, and then there's folks like this poet here, where there's a lot of real deep-seated emotion there, but there's also a lot of training, a lot of study involved, obviously. So very well-constructed poems and very emotionally telling. So I really, rather enjoyed it. So I'm still, of course, going through my Arthurian Legends, the Morte Arthur. So I'll be dipping in and out of that, and I have my Edna St. Vincent Millay book as well. So I'm essentially going to be going through about 3 books at the same time. You know, But happily, as I said, I have a week off, so I have plenty of time to read and smoke, and I fully intend on taking advantage of that time. Well, so on to the topic for today, and I have to just keep on relighting this goodness. It's the ever-present difficulty with being a YTPC presenter is if you spend the time talking, then you can't keep puffing, you lose your ember, or if you spend the whole time puffing, you never get your video out, or it ends up being a 30-minute video with 5 minutes of talking. So something I know my fellow presenters probably struggle with as well. But it is important to actually smoke a pipe on a pipe smoking YouTube channel. So, pneumatology. I began the discussion a few weeks ago and kind of laid the groundwork for it. So, I thought it would be helpful to perhaps get into a discussion of how the Holy Spirit actually operates in creation. Because as I said in the previous video, we come to know the Holy Spirit through the Holy Spirit's actions. So when, how, and where does the Holy Spirit act? We have, with the instances of the actions of Christ, obviously recorded incidents, correct? And they're singular in nature. Even in later on in Luke, with the story of the road to his Emmaus, when Jesus appears to the two people on the road, and then disappears and reappears with the disciples, and there's just that instantaneous transport of his physical self. It's still single events. It's still Jesus here or Jesus there. When we talk about the Holy Spirit, we have to think of terms of pervasive presence and action. Wolfhard Pannenberg, who's a 20th century German theologian who passed away about 15 years ago, maybe not quite that long ago. He proposed that we think of the Holy Spirit in terms of a field, like a magnetic field or electromagnetic field, not in a literal sense. He's using it as allegory, but the idea of a pervasive, dynamic, and active presence. So we have the Holy Spirit existing everywhere simultaneously, in and through all the created order. And he gets to this by discussing the evolution of humanity and the progression of the natural world. And that not only our movement and progression as created beings, but the movement and progression of everything in the world, whether it's a tree growing or whatever, that all of these things exist in a dynamic growth. But even beyond that, things just existing, just being, it's a state of active being. So a rock, for instance, is a rock because it is actively being a rock. It is being what it is in the terms of it continually being actively as a rock. So no movement that we can see, no actions that we can see, but the fact that it is existing, it is being held in existence through its continual active being. And that continual active being is due to the pervasive energy and engagement of the Holy Spirit. Now, some people have taken that to mean that God is essentially holding all the created order in being, in God's grip, essentially. That God created the universe, but creation continua, the continual act of creation, means that God is holding it all together, and if God releases God's control, it snaps back into nothingness. So you can think of it in terms of like a rubber band. Like God's hand is expanding the rubber band, and then that's the universe. And then if God pulls God's hand away, the rubber band snaps into nothingness. Some people have interpreted it that way. I don't quite think that's where Pannenberg was going with it. I think Pannenberg was going in a bit more of a controversial area, which is panentheism. Now, in point of fact, Pannenberg says in his Systematic Theology, Volume 2, that he is not a panentheist, that he states that explicitly. However, Pannenberg's theology leads him towards what we would call today panentheism, which is God in and through all of creation. Now we can reconcile that because in the time when Pannenberg was writing, panentheism was really just pantheism 2.0. It was God is the world. So I am God, you are God, that tree is God, everything else like that. God's identity is in creation. Panentheism, as it's dealt with in a more modern context, specifically through science and religion, states that God is in and through everything, but it's God's actions in and through everything. It is not God's person. So we can think of the Holy Spirit as a member of the Trinity, a largely forgotten member of the Trinity, acting in and through creation. So when we see the actions of the Holy Spirit, we're seeing the actions of God, because God is meshed, obviously, as a Trinitarian God, right? So we can see the actions of God in and through all of creation, not just in quote unquote miracles. And I'll do a video on miracles because I think that's a misnomer. But also in just the day-to-day existence, that everything being held in existence is being held in an existence through the efforts of God, through the efforts of the Holy Spirit, who is also God. So we see a pervasive presence and action, not only in intermittent events or in growth and progression, but also in things just existing. They have the ability to exist because the Holy Spirit acts in and through them as an existent phenomenon in a dynamic, progressively moving fashion. And we can separate the action and the identity of the Holy Spirit, the action and identity of God, because we can see objectively that a person's actions are not the person, right? My handshake is not me, okay? But also we have the work of Gregory Palamas in the Hesychast controversy and the writings back and forth on there, where oh goodness, I'll look at the dates, but long time ago. Look up Gregory Palamas. But when he began that initial writing, talking about the separation of God's action and God's identity, because we don't fully engage with God's person, right? We fully engage with God's actions, but we cannot fully take God's person into ourselves. That would be pantheism. That would be us becoming God. So while we can feel the actions of God, we can engage the actions of God, we cannot fully engage God's person, because then we would fully know God, and then we would be God. So there has to be a separation between God's action and God's person, because God does have a causative effect in the physical world. That's objectively true no matter how you look at creation theology in any manner. There has to be a fully relational aspect to God's God in the world, a fully relational aspect between God and the world. Otherwise, there would be no causal effect, right? Nothing could be into being if God didn't have some action with it. And we can see that action through the actions of the Holy Spirit. And we can understand those actions through the manner of a pervasive, dynamic, creative, engaging, and causative field of operations. The trick is not thinking of it as a field like a magnetic field, like a non-personal force, because the Holy Spirit is a person. That's a necessary aspect of Trinitarian theology. It's just the personhood in a way that's a little bit more difficult for us to wrap our minds around. And that's where I said in a video I did a couple of months ago, Eastern traditions are really helpful in helping us get our minds wrapped around that. We can step away from that substance dualism that is pervasive in the West and think about a physical and spiritual integration. Then we can think about that spiritual integration being driven from the actions of the Holy Spirit. So we can see the Holy Spirit acting as a pervasive field in through all creation in a causative manner, in a relational causal manner, so that it's not just downward causation. There's a feedback loop where we can have some kind of effect on things as well, but where the overarching goal, the providence of God, is realized. But that was a whole lot of words. And of course, now, the ember has died. So I must relight to enjoy the rest of my pipe. But as always, I hope you have a lovely week. And of course, if there's any questions on any of these topics, or like, you're using way too many words, you're speaking way too quickly, this doesn't make any sense, I'd like clarification on that, I encourage you to write in the comments. The entire purpose of this channel is to open a dialogue. None of us are as smart as all of us, and anyone can offer insight into things. I had a rather interesting back and forth discussion about tattoos with a person from one of my earlier videos. So I encourage you to ask questions, make comments, as long as they're appropriate and respectful of everyone, because that's how we all learn. So in the meantime, keep on learning. Have a wonderful week, and as always, happy reading.